The story of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse is one of the most famous mysteries in history. It is a true event that took place in the year 1900 on a small, lonely group of islands off the coast of Scotland. These islands are called the Flannan Isles, and the lighthouse stands on one of them named Eilean Mor. For many years, sailors feared the waters around these islands because the sea was rough, the waves were strong, and the weather could change suddenly. To help ships travel safely, a lighthouse was built there in 1899. Lighthouse keepers were appointed to stay on the island and make sure the light was always shining at night so passing ships could avoid the dangerous rocks. The lighthouse was far away from any town or village. No one lived on the islands except the lighthouse keepers. There were 3 men working together at that time: Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur. These men lived in the lighthouse for weeks at a time before being replaced by other keepers. Their job was not easy. They had to clean the light, keep it burning, record the weather, check the equipment, and stay alert even during storms or cold winter nights. Still, they were used to this life, and they understood that their work was important. Without them, ships could not safely pass by. Everything seemed normal until mid-December 1900, when ships sailing nearby noticed something strange. The lighthouse, which should have been shining brightly every night, was completely dark. At first, sailors thought perhaps the men were delayed or that the equipment had a small problem. But day after day, the light remained off. This was extremely unusual because lighthouse keepers were trained never to leave the lighthouse dark. Even if one man became sick or something broke, the others would fix it or take turns keeping the light on. On December 26, 1900, a ship named the Hesperus was sent to the island to check on the keepers. The captain, Captain Harvey, expected to see one of the men standing on the landing platform, waving hello or preparing ropes to help the ship's crew come ashore. But when the ship approached the island, no one was there. The lighthouse looked silent and empty. The wind howled through the rocks, waves crashed loudly below the cliffs, and the lighthouse stood tall, but without a single sign of life. The captain sent a man named Joseph Moore, one of the relief lighthouse keepers, to go ashore and investigate. Moore climbed the steep stairs carved into the rock and walked toward the lighthouse. He later said that he felt uneasy even before reaching the door. When he arrived, he saw that the front door was unlocked. This was unusual because the keepers always kept the lighthouse secure. Inside, Moore found more strange details. The beds were unmade, as if the men had gotten up recently. The clock had stopped, the lamp inside was clean and ready for use, and a meal on the table had been untouched. Nothing in the lighthouse looked like there had been a fight or a panic. Everything looked normal except for one thing: the 3 men were gone. Moore returned to the captain and reported what he saw. The captain then ordered more men to search the island carefully. Together, they walked around the lighthouse buildings, checked the storerooms, and examined the surrounding land. They found that the west landing, the place where supplies were usually unloaded from boats, had been damaged by strong waves. Ropes were scattered, a box was broken, and heavy iron equipment had been moved by the force of the sea. The landing area looked as if a violent storm had recently struck it. Inside the lighthouse, they noticed something important. The keepers had left behind many of their personal items. 2 sets of thick weather coats were missing, but one coat belonging to Donald MacArthur was still hanging on the wall. This meant that if the men had gone outside, MacArthur had gone without his coat, which was very unusual given the cold December weather. Lighthouse keepers never stepped out without their protective clothing unless something urgent was happening. Another clue came from the logbook, where keepers wrote daily notes about the weather and their activities. The entries suggested that the men had experienced a severe storm and felt stressed or anxious about it. However, here is the strange part. The weather reports for nearby islands showed no storm at the time the entries were supposedly written. This caused confusion. Some historians believe the entries were real, while others think someone added them later to make the story more mysterious. After searching the entire island and even shouting the men's names across the cliffs, the team realized there was no sign of the keepers anywhere. They had simply disappeared. With no bodies, no broken lighthouse equipment, and no messages left behind, the mystery became even deeper. The assistant lighthouse keepers sent a message back to the mainland saying, "The 3 keepers have disappeared from the island. The clocks have stopped, and no sign can be found of the men." When news of the disappearance reached the mainland, people were shocked. Newspapers wrote dramatic stories, calling it a great mystery and a puzzle with no answers. Some people came up with wild theories. They suggested that sea monsters might have taken the men, or that ghosts from the old ruins on the island had scared them to death. Others believed the men had fought each other or that they had planned to disappear. Some even thought foreign spies or pirates might have kidnapped them. But there was no evidence for any of these strange ideas. They were mostly imaginative stories created because people were fascinated by the mystery. The official investigation, led by the Northern Lighthouse Board, tried to understand what really happened. They studied the damaged West Landing carefully. The waves in that area were known to be extremely strong, especially in winter. Even on calm days, rogue waves, huge, sudden waves could appear without warning. These waves could rise more than 40 feet high and sweep anything in their path into the ocean. Some workers had already reported that equipment had been washed away there in the past. The investigators believed that the most likely explanation was that all three men had been swept out to sea by a powerful wave. But why would all three be outside at the same time?
This was the biggest question.
Normally, one man had to stay inside the lighthouse at all times. Breaking this rule was extremely uncommon. Investigators suggested a few possibilities. One explanation was that two men went outside first to check on damage caused by the waves. Perhaps ropes, crates, or equipment had been shaken loose and they needed to secure them. Then something unexpected happened. Maybe one of the men slipped, or a wave suddenly rushed toward them. Donald MacArthur, seeing the danger from inside, may have rushed out without putting on his coat to help the others. In that moment, a massive wave might have hit all three men, sweeping them off the rocks and pulling them into the deep sea. Another possibility was that a storm had come quickly and violently, and the men went out together to fasten down equipment. But again, weather reports showed no severe storm during the disappearance period. Some investigators believe that even without a full storm, the natural geography of the island could cause waves to crash violently at random times. The cliffs acted like walls, and when waves hit them, they could bounce and return with enormous force. In the end, the official report concluded that the men most likely died in an accident caused by the sea. They wrote that the strong waves and dangerous conditions at the West Landing had probably swept the men away. No trace of their bodies was ever found, which is not surprising in such rough waters. The sea around the Flannan Isles is extremely deep, and currents are strong enough to carry anything far away within hours. Despite the official explanation, the public continued to be fascinated by the story. Some people refused to believe that such experienced lighthouse keepers would all break the rules and go outside together. Others wondered about the stopped clock, the untouched food, and the open door. Many writers began adding dramatic details to the story, making it sound even spookier. Over time, the event became a legend. It inspired poems, songs, novels, and even movies. But behind all the mystery, the truth remains simple. Three men disappeared while doing their dangerous job on one of the loneliest islands in Scotland. Today, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse is automated, which means no one lives there anymore. Machines operate the light, and workers only visit the island occasionally for maintenance. The lighthouse still stands as a reminder of the three men who vanished more than a century ago. Visitors who see the lighthouse from passing ships still feel a sense of wonder and sometimes a chill when they think about the empty rooms, the untouched meal, and the missing keepers. The mystery has never been completely solved, and perhaps it never will be. But the most likely explanation remains that nature, not something supernatural, caused the tragedy. Even though the story is more than 100 years old, people continue to talk about it because it shows how powerful nature can be and how fragile human life is in comparison. The lighthouse keepers were brave men who worked in harsh conditions to protect sailors. Their disappearance reminds us of the dangers they faced every day. The sea around the Flannan Isles is beautiful but unpredictable, and even the strongest, most skilled workers could be caught off guard. In the end, the mystery of the lighthouse keepers teaches us about respect for nature and the courage of those who work to keep others safe.